Why you are a slave in the corporate world. There are two things that we can do with our time as humans. One of them is consuming, the other is creating. When you are spending your time throughout your day, you're doing one of these things. You're consuming or you're creating. You can sit and ask yourself what you're doing right now, and the answer is you are consuming because you're watching this video, and therefore if you are consuming, you are not creating. Now you can only really be doing one or the other. Each one only allows space for the other to happen, essentially. So while I'm consuming something, I cannot simultaneously be creating. I need to stop consuming in order to create. Many of us have been spending a lot of time on our devices, on our phones, and on them we consume a lot of content. Whenever we go on social media, whenever we go on the internet, whenever we pretty much view anything on our devices, we are consuming content on there, which has essentially been created by others. When we consume content on these devices, it is programmed in a way and structured in a way in which we receive dopamine from consuming that content. So for example, we all know that if I put up a photo and I get a lot of likes, I get dopamine from those likes, because those likes, essentially, whether I choose to or not, make me feel good about myself, and then that surges dopamine in my system. Dopamine is actually a chemical that's released within us that encourages us to do things again. So it motivates us. It's the motivational hormone in our body. It encourages us to do something again. Now this pathway is there in place for a number of reasons, and evolutionary wise, it's actually really effective for people that made the right choices back in the Paleolithic times. If they were hunting or they ate a certain type of food that was really good for them, you might get dopamine from that, and that tells your brain that you want to do this again. This is good for you. It builds those pathways of healthy habits for you. There is also the opposite effect of that can actually in these days impact us quite negatively. If I'm spending a lot of time on social media, I'm posting pictures, those pictures are making me feel good. It's the feel-good hormone, it's dopamine. I feel great, I feel motivated to do that again, and then I get caught up in the cycle of receiving my dopamine from going to these online platforms and consuming this content. So essentially you become trapped in consuming this content because it makes you feel good about yourself. It is literally a pathway that is neurologically imprinted in your brain. Now the problem with that is if you spend time consuming and you spend so much time getting dopamine this way, it doesn't leave much other room for you to get dopamine from many other things, because these platforms are what many people have called a dopamine farm. It is reaping the dopamine from our system. It gives us an unnatural amount of dopamine, so we essentially become addicted to them. And then you don't really feel the need to go to other places and get that dopamine source. Now, when I spend so much time consuming and getting my dopamine that way, I'm addicted to going on my device, so I don't really then spend much time creating anything. You also need dopamine to create things. So if I'm like, oh, I really want to create this blog, I really want to write some posts, I maybe want to start getting into baking and baking some cakes and set up my own business or something like that, essentially what's going to help me do that is if I have dopamine, because the dopamine will motivate me to do that, and it's also the thing that will generate that spark of creativity within me and help me be creative and put those pathways together to come up with those ideas and come up with those texts that I want to write. So really what we need to be doing is rewiring our pathway of how we receive dopamine in our lives. And to do that, you need to stop being a consumer. You need to start being a creator, because we spend so much time consuming that we never spend any time actually creating any content. And pretty much we are creative beings. All of us are very creative beings. That is what we are here to do. We literally manifest things into existence every single day, whether we know it or not. We are purely always putting out things into the world and creating everything. Your whole life around you has been created by you. It would not be here if it wasn't for you. I look around my room right now and I'm like, every object in this room is here because in some way or another I brought that object to me, even if it was as simple as me having the thought, going out to the store and buying it. So if you really want to start putting your plans into action and creating your own content in the world, you really need to stop consuming, stop allowing these pathways to be solidified in your brain, because it's really about rewiring where you're getting that dopamine from. And if you can start putting down your devices and stop spending so much time consuming other people's content, it will allow you to essentially start creating your own. I'm actually wanting to do something called a dopamine fast, which means you spend no time doing anything like checking your devices, eating even food, because you get dopamine from things as simple as that. Just completely doing nothing all day to the point where hopefully I can rewire my system to allow me to start using that dopamine in the ways that I want it to, in things like the gym, eating foods that are healthy, that make me feel good about myself, creating my own content, putting out my own projects and things like that. So that's just another way that we are a slave to the system, a slave as consumers essentially, because a lot of people spend a lot of money on shit that they just don't need, and we work 9 to 5, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day to essentially just spend money on things that are pushed forward into your consciousness through overconsumption. So that's a way that you can start putting out your things into the world, start being your own boss. And yeah, that's my other tip for the day.